Have you ever wondered how much beetroot you can plant in 100 Minecraft days? No? Well, me neither. But I decided to give it a go anyway, for, educational purposes. I launched a brand new Minecraft world. My plan, cover as much of it in beetroot as possible. However, to start farming beetroot, you need seeds, which can either be found in villages, mineshafts, or traded for by a wandering trader. Mineshafts are scary, wandering traders spawn sporadically, so I set my sights on finding a village. On day 0, I went through all of the typical steps. Mine trees, make a crafting table, get stone, find food, and then I set off walking, desperate to find a village as quickly as possible. The sooner I found beetroot seeds, the more time I'd have to plant them. I usually have pretty good luck with finding villages, especially in the savannah. However, for some reason, this luck didn't translate in this world. It was already past midday and nothing. I decided to mine some coal when I came across my first hostile mob, which quickly reminded me that I needed to find some iron and make a shield. That hadn't been one of my priorities, but now it most definitely was. Day 0 ended with no village, but a handful of useful resources under my belt. Day 1 was spent gathering more resources to help me survive mostly, but in the evening I did make myself a boat to help me search the area. Day 2 was going to be the day I found beetroot seeds. I could just feel it, until I couldn't because I found absolutely nothing. Instead, I found a jungle which devastated me after walking for almost 20 minutes because villagers don't spawn in jungles. I was starting to feel hopeless. I'd been searching for a village for 3 whole days, so I tried shifting to look for mineshafts instead, which turned out to be a horrible idea because I hate caves. I quickly decided against this tactic and went back looking for villagers. And guess what? I found one! It had taken me 3 days. I was overjoyed to say the least. I was so excited to actually get started on this challenge and start planting beetroot. It was my purpose. I went in and out of houses searching for seeds, but something was severely wrong. The village didn't have any crops. How do they have food? I have no idea, but they certainly don't grow any. Enraged by this discovery, I did the only rational thing I could think of. I burnt it to the ground and watched it burn as I walked off in search of another village, which thankfully did not take me very long to find. I dashed over there, racing to the crops I saw, and finally there. Our first beetroot seeds. Overjoyed, I destroyed the rest of the crops to try and get as many seeds as I could. Feeling guilty that I destroyed everything, I gave the villagers back the carrots and potatoes I got. I wouldn't be needing them, but there wasn't just one planter. This village was far more superior to the other. All I needed to do now was find a nice spot to plant them. But it needed to be perfect, and somehow while I was looking, I came across another village with even more beetroot seeds, about 300 blocks from the last one, as well as a pink sheep. My luck was finally changing. Heading back towards the second village, I finally found my perfect spot where I wanted to start this challenge. So I started to clear out an area for my starter base, and on the eve of day 4, I planted my first beetroot seeds. On day 5, I realised that I was going to have to do a lot of landscaping to make this a bit easier for myself. So I spent most of it digging dirt and keeping a close eye on my seeds. A lot of this dirt was going to be used to replace anything that isn't dirt, because you can't grow beetroot on sand. Day 6 was the day I tried to set myself up for success. I built myself a tree farm as I knew wood was going to be an important resource that I was going to need often. Not quite as important as beetroot though. I marked the tree farm out in a line of cobblestone to let myself know that this was going to be a beetroot free area. My beetroot was also coming along nicely and growing well. I'd landscaped a lot and I started building my starter house. And I think this house might actually be the ugliest house I've ever built on this channel. It was a disaster. But not everything was bad. On the morning of day 7, my first beetroot had finally grown. It only gave me 1 seed. My disappointment was immeasurable. However, it was lessened slightly when I ate the first ever beetroot I successfully farmed. It satisfied me enough to forget about the single seed, as I knew more were to come. It only took another 5 minutes for my second plant to grow, and this time I got 4 seeds from it, which I used to expand the farm. I excitedly ran back to my house and made a separate chest in the corner to store my beetroots, and I gave this chest the very imaginative name of the Beetroot chest. And as the sun set on day 7, I watched my beetroot closely and even saw one grow right in front of my eyes. Nothing exciting happened on day 8. I spent it collecting resources like logs and dirt, but I did witness a squid die. I was very excited when I noticed that I had 4 fully grown beetroots, which gave me 10 new beetroot seeds to plant. Things were expanding fast. I found a cave nearby thanks to a burning zombie alerting me to its presence. I mined some coal and iron and explored the cave system a bit before I got too scared and retreated. This then prompted me to explore the hill behind my starter house, where I found a ruined portal and also the spot I wanted to build my main house. Day 9 was full of dirt digging. I knew I was going to need a lot of it to smooth out the terrain and block up any holes in cave systems, so I made like 5 shovels and got to work, while also checking in with my beetroot every so often. In order to maximize efficiency, I needed to try and farm the beetroot as soon as it grew. I used the dirt I had dug to begin to fill in the area I wanted my house to go. It almost used up all of the dirt I had on me. I decided that night to try and stay up, as I knew that being awake through the night would give me an extra 10 minutes of beetroot farming that I wouldn't have if I went to sleep. It was very boring and kind of scary, and only 3 beetroot grew. But then it started raining and there were lots of monsters, so I decided to retreat to bed. Day 10 marked the fact that I was now 10% through the challenge and I had a total of 14 beetroot to my name. I started the day by clearing out the mobs that spawned overnight. I also made my first bucket, which was going to be extremely useful, and it's safe to say that I'm so glad buckets don't have durability. My beetroot was starting to grow quite fast. Whenever I would check on it, there were always some fully grown crops. Since I was also hoping to be out at night more often, I decided to play things smart and place some torches around my house with the hope that not as many mobs would bother me. It worked and I was left mostly unbothered for the night, which I spent pacing up and down my beetroot farm. Day 11, I started planning out my house. I knew that it wasn't going to be the biggest or prettiest thing, but I wanted it to look a bit nicer than the shack I was currently living in. I was really surprised to come down the mountain after about 5 minutes to see that so much of my beetroot had grown. This was truly starting to get exciting. I had 25 seeds to expand my farm with. I knew that I wanted my main house to be in a beetroot-free zone, so I decided to create a circle around the build, which would just be grass, and everything outside would be beetroot. This took a bit of maths and trial and error, but I eventually figured out how to make a circle that perfectly fits around my house. In the evening of day 12, I crumpled my first of many beetroot seeds. I was confused for a second, as I'd stepped down onto the seeds multiple times before and nothing happened, but for some reason this time it squashed them. This would happen many times over the course of this challenge, and it never got less frustrating. In this night, I also broke my first hoe and completed my first stack of beetroot. Day 13 had me fighting multiple mobs, including 2 water skeletons, trying to organise my life a little bit, and cutting down my first oversized oak tree. Seriously, these never get any less frustrating to destroy. My beetroot was spreading nicely. I was slowly expanding my farm down the river as well as up onto the second level of grass, slowly encroaching towards my shack. In the evening, I also started on building my house, deciding to create some nice arched windows to frame the front. They looked quite funny from afar. I spent the night protecting my beetroot from harm, as well as almost getting blown up by a creeper. Day 14, I got freaked out by an enderman multiple times. I kept having to look over my shoulder to check he hadn't teleported behind me. For some reason on this day, he kept bothering me despite it being the middle of the day. This was the first of many enderman encounters. At this stage, I was finally getting a constant stream of beetroot growing. Whenever I looked, there was at least one ready to be harvested. I also took it upon myself to experiment with jumping and falling on crops as I crushed my second beetroot on this day. I found that jumping on them almost always broke the crop, but falling on them was like a 50-50 chance. It's safe to say that I was thoroughly confused. It was definitely starting to get harder to travel between layers without falling on any beetroot now that my farm was expanding. As the sun rose on day 15, I admired how much my farm had grown since I started planting less than 10 days ago. On On this day, I started to fill in my house circle with cobblestone, but quickly realised I didn't have enough. In between jobs, I checked on my beetroot. So much had grown in such a short time. I almost got 2 stacks of seeds from a single harvest. This made me realise how quickly I'm going to be going through hoes. It was also getting a bit overwhelming. There was always beetroot that needed to be harvested, and I didn't have the time or resources to keep up with it. In the afternoon of day 16, I harvested just over 3 stacks of beetroot seeds. I was in the process of planting them when my hoe broke. Once I made a new one, I spotted something ominous in the distance. I had my first pillagers. Well, pillager. There was weirdly only one of them. I spent the rest of the night trying to plant as much beetroot as possible and continually being interrupted by mobs. Day 17, I had the ugly realization that mobs could trample crops. This definitely had me slightly panicked. Day 17 was not the most interesting. I farmed beetroot, planted beetroot, made new hoes, ran out of cobblestone, mined cobblestone, made new hoes, planted beetroot, and repeat. This is honestly what most of these 100 days was, and I spent the majority of my time in this world doing this. I had been neglecting working on my house, focusing my time and effort into collecting and planting as much beetroot as possible. So on day 18, I worked on filling in the water circle around my house, which was tedious to say the least, and then I started tilling the area to get the beetroot farm going up here. But then a thunderstorm hit, and I don't like thunderstorms, so I ended up going to sleep and losing the rest of day 18. I flitted between jobs on day 19. I farmed beetroot, planted some more up on the top of the hill, and continued building my house, which was coming along very slowly thanks to my beetroot priorities. After losing the majority of day 18, I tried to make up lost time by spending the night preparing to plant beetroot around my tree farm, gathering some more seeds, and warding off zombies. The morning of day 20, I decided to have a quick look at my statistics, curious about what they looked like a fifth of the way through this challenge. I had planted a total of 2,971 beetroot seeds and picked up 1,124 beetroots. I was honestly quite surprised by this number. This was also the point where I officially stopped trying to keep on top of my beetroot. I collected seeds when I needed to, but I wasn't rushing to harvest every single piece that had grown. It was simply too much to keep on top of. Day 21, I finally filled in the floor of my house, leaving only the windows, finishing the walls, and the roof to go. I also took a quick trip over the river to see if any of the villagers had a stone cutter I could steal, borrow, to save me on some cobblestone when making stairs. Sadly, they didn't. Day 22, I started on the roof of my house and internally cried when I realized how much cobblestone it was going to take for me to complete it. I also had to upgrade my single beetroot chest to a double chest as I'd filled it entirely. My beetroot farm was spreading nicely. I had covered quite a large area and spent day 23 expanding this even further. I also started to add in the windows of my house, but quickly realized I hadn't made enough glass panes, so couldn't complete this. On this day, I also started planting beetroot on the hillside, planning on joining up the farm at the bottom by the river and the farm at the top of the hill. I was just casually making stairs when I thought I heard something. It turned out that there was a creeper hidden sneakily behind my house. The rest of the day was a series of disasters. I placed a slab wrong and then didn't have a pickaxe to break it. I kept falling off my roof while trying to place stairs, and I got attacked by 2 zombies. I went through multiple apples on this day, and if that wasn't enough, I accidentally flooded some of my crops and then trampled some tilled dirt to add insult to injury. Day 25. A quarter of the way through the challenge and I hadn't even finished building my main house. I started working on it on day 13 and I still hadn't finished it. I was determined to get myself out of this tiny shack as quickly as possible, even if it did mean I had to neglect my beetroot for a bit. I finished building the final wall of my house, added in the final windows, and then got distracted mining some coal for some reason. But then I continued working on the roof. Actually, no, I got distracted by a zombie. But then I actually made some good progress progress and finally finished the roof that night. On the morning of day 26, I killed a creeper for crushing not 1, not 2, but 3 of my crops, and finally covered up the main cave that monsters kept emerging from. I spent most of the day planting stacks and stacks of beetroot. It was really spreading quite far by now. It was only in that evening that I decided to transport my door and bed up the hillside, and finally, on this day, I slept in my new home. Day 27, I transported my belongings up to the house, trying my best to keep some level of order. I also discovered how difficult it was going to be to traverse down the hillside without trampling on any crops. It was only going to get more difficult. I also finally dismantled the eyesore that was my first house. It was definitely overdue. I then planted beetroot over where my house once stood. The sun rose on day 28 with me patching up some holes in the ground to make them more beetroot compatible, and continuing my quest to join up my farms, complete with some risky maneuvers that, if done wrong, could have flooded a lot of my beetroot. This remained my aim moving forward, but it was a difficult process because of how steep some of the hill was, and it definitely caused a couple of mishaps. One in particular caused quite a lot of issues, and as if that wasn't enough, I got my second visit from pillagers on day 29. They'd come better prepared this time, but were no match against me. I woke up on day 30 with an arrow still in my chest, but my motivation to plant beetroot burning strong. I decided to give myself a bit of fun. I traversed all the way to the bottom of my farm where it all begun and just went for it. I was running low on seeds, so decided that this was a good way to rejuvenate my supplies while also being satisfying. I even saved not 1, not 2, but 3 squids during this. With my house complete, my sole focus became beetroot, and my plan to spread it as far as I possibly could. Nothing else mattered. I tried my best to cover up the massive hole in the ground next to my house, trying to landscape it in a way that looked natural. The way that I filled this in would prove to be a bit of a problem later though when it came to placing water sources. I filled my first double chest of beetroot on day 32 and frustratingly tried to continue my beetroot farm up a steep part of the hill. I crushed multiple crops. Day 33, I saw a skeleton using one of my beetroot water sources as a bathtub, so I had to quickly fix that. Those water sources are for my beetroot only. After collecting so many beetroot seeds, I stocked my inventory full of hose and set off to continue covering the hill in beetroot. I think I crushed about 4 or 5 plants on my way down. It started to become more difficult to traverse the terrain now that I had so much beetroot planted. It meant that I had to take really long detours to either get to an infinite water source or down the hill if I wanted to do it without risking trampling on any crops. I worked on transforming a really nice flat area down by the river that night, using up all of the stacks of seeds I collected the previous day. I started working on the farm at the top of the hill, realizing that I'd been prioritizing planting at the bottom. Day 36. Well over a third through this challenge, and I woke up to a skeleton right outside my door, and then I proceeded to get jump scared by a creeper that I simply didn't see because he was hiding in the grass. So I had to fix that hole, as well as just generally level out the area to make it easier to plant on. Day 37, my beetroot planting was cut short thanks to a thunderstorm. The following days were mostly the same, full of trying to expand my beetroot farm up the hill, collecting seeds, making hose, filling in holes and planting so much beetroot. On day 40, my poor job at landscaping came around to bite me. It took a little while to fix my water sources, but I got there. Day 41. The hillside was really starting to come along at this point. I also finally ran out of apples on this day, so I had to start fueling myself with beetroot. As much as I love beetroot, it's a frustrating food source. Seeing as I'd made such good progress on the hillside, I decided to give myself a break from planting beetroot at a vertical level, and started working on planting beetroot at the top of the hill at a more horizontal level. Day 43. A couple of confusing things happened. I saw an enderman just chilling in the distance, followed by something dying. I have no idea what. Day 44. I continued landscaping the hill my house is on, filling in holes and clearing out grass, and saw the enderman again. I continued working, not taking any notice of him, hoping he won't bother me, but I don't have the best track with endermen minding their business. Now that I'd made massive progress at the front of my house, I wanted to start expanding my beetroot farm backwards and up the hill on the other side of my house. This was kind of a tedious process, I'm not going to lie. I started planting beetroot across the river the night of day 46. I didn't get much done as I was waiting for the leaves leaves of my tree farm to despawn, but I did start. Day 47, the Enderman was back. I observed him for a while as he was teleporting through my beetroot. I tried to ignore him, but he kept getting closer, which concerned me. But I wasn't too worried as I was preoccupied with my own jobs. He definitely kept me on edge though, especially when he teleported across the river to where I was working. Yeah, that freaked me out. Day 48, I filled my second double chest of beetroot and got to work covering some of the easier areas by my house. In the afternoon, I had some unexpected visitors once again. I was able to deal with them relatively quickly and use this as an excuse to continue working at the bottom of the hill. I discovered something strange that night though. A tiny squid. I'd never seen one before, so it's safe to say that I was intrigued by this. I also found tiny fish and was very confused. I'm assuming that different sized squid and salmon was a recent update, but to this day, I'm unsure. Day 49, the Enderman was around briefly that morning, or so I thought. He reappeared just as I was about to start planting for the day, zipping around and across the lake and keeping me on edge. When it wasn't the Enderman bothering me, it was the horses getting in my way as I tried to tour the area. But at least they weren't trampling my crops. No, it was only me doing that. Halfway through the challenge, wow. I did a quick check of my statistics and I was shocked. In 50 days, I had planted 20,009 beetroot seeds and had picked up almost 10,000 pieces of beetroot. I was pleasantly surprised and determined to plant even more, even with the horse that was still getting in my way. Thankfully, I was almost done with the area that they inhabited, so I promised that I'd be on my way soon enough. In the evening, I started hearing odd noises. It took some searching, but I discovered that a wandering trader had spawned. I was in no need for one, so I just left them to it. Day 51, I had a couple of mobs to deal with and then decided to cut down my trees as I was running low on apples once again. I spent the rest of the day working on the section on the other side of the river and also witnessed a squid beach itself. I had a minor flood on day 52 because I misclicked my water bucket. It didn't destroy many crops, but it was still very annoying. Day 53, I had another visit from a wandering trader and realised that they were trampling all of my crops. So I did the only sensible thing. I killed the trader and hoped that the llamas wouldn't do any more damage. Thankfully, this seemed to work out. Day 54, 55 and 56, I started clearing out another area to prepare it for beetroot. I wanted everything in my render distance to just be crops, and I could see this area from my home, so I needed to fix it, which I spent several days and nights working on. Day 57, the Enderman was back, watching me from afar as I planted crops, slowly creeping up on me. His presence made me distracted and I accidentally flooded my crops again. I spent hours in this world and I'd made such good progress, but I still had over 40 days to go. I was harvesting and planting beetroot every single day for almost a month in real life at this point. I had turned my attention back to the hill behind my house, deciding that this was my new priority. It was slow progress, but it was turning out well. By day 68, the days were passing quickly. The endpoint was getting closer and closer, and I still had so much land to cover in beetroot. Day 69, I had to mute the audio of because I was blasting Christmas tunes while planting beetroot. It definitely made the time go by faster. On day 70, I had another skeleton using a beetroot water source as a bath. I had evidence of sheep trampling my crops. I felt bad, but I had to do what was best for my beetroot. Day 72, I lost the night because of another thunderstorm. Day 73 to 75, I continued expanding my beetroot upwards, feeling slightly rushed to get the entire hill covered now that I was over 3/4 through the challenge. I also had finally found a way to scale down the hill without crushing any crops. This was a game changer. Planting on the hill became my priority. I'd spent so much time working on the front of my house that I felt like I'd completely neglected the back of it, and time was definitely beginning to run out. I had so much ground still to cover. Day 79 felt like a break. A frustrating break as I spent most of it trying to get all the last logs out of multiple large trees that had grown, but it was a nice change from all of the beetroot. Day 80 and 81, I was back on the grind, working on the top of the hill. I was advancing quickly, but also going through seeds unbelievably fast. I mostly ignored the parts of the hill that I wouldn't be able to see from my house, which definitely saved some time. I I wish I could have filled everything in my render distance in, but that simply was not possible with the time constraints I had. Day 82, 83, 84, and 85, I started to focus on the hillside that wasn't quite as close, but was also in view of my house. This is what I spent most of the remaining days in this world working on. The Enderman was back on day 86. But thankfully he didn't stick around for long. However, on the same day, as if to make up for the Enderman's visit being brief, I had some more pillagers. It had honestly been a while since they'd last showed up, so I was kind of anticipating it. As if day 86 wasn't entertaining enough, I got a new roommate in the evening. The Enderman decided that my house was also his house, and honestly I didn't mind it too much, other than the fact that I was scared to look anywhere near him. For the most part, we were just chilling. I tried to go to sleep, but unfortunately I forgot that Endermen still counted as monsters, so I decided to make an Enderman-sized doorway for him and he let himself out. Day 87 he disappeared to my surprise. Or so I thought. No, he somehow got back into my house and decided he quite liked it in there. I was pressed for time, so I decided to just leave him to it and continue my beetroot planting. He could leave when he felt like it. Day 88, I realised I still had some work to do on the area across the river. From the top of the hill, I could still see some grass, which was a big no-no. I needed to get rid of that as soon as possible. I spent the rest of this day, day 89 and day 90 working on this until I felt like I'd covered enough of the area. I then switched it up on day 91 to another area that I felt I hadn't planted enough beetroot in. Thankfully this area was very flat and easy to farm on. It made the time go by quickly. Day 92 I had a major creeper explosion, which then led to part of my farm getting flooded. I had to spend some time fixing that issue before heading back over to continue my beetroot planting. Finally satisfied with that area, I realised I had a big issue, and that issue was a hill that could easily be seen from my house. I decided that this would be my final task, cover this hill in beetroot and I'd have surrounded my house with it. I started by clearing out the grass, which attracted a couple of chickens over to me. I gave each of them a seed to try and get them off my tail. I was slightly daunted by this new task, but I knew it needed to be done. I'm not going to lie, the chickens were starting to annoy me. Especially with my time-sensitive challenge, I needed the least amount of distractions possible. Apparently my world disagreed and threw another set of pillagers at me on day 94. I really could have used without the visitors, and to make it worse, my shield broke mid-fight, meaning I had to lead them through the beetroot so I could lock myself in my house to make a new one. Many beetroot got crushed because of this, and after I won the battle, I had a lot of cleaning up to do, which I really could have used without. Somehow, don't ask me how, because I have no idea, but on day 95, just a day after the last lot, more pillagers showed up. When I tell you I was baffled, I was completely baffled. It was a lot easier of a fight than the day before though, but again, a waste of my precious time. Day 96, I finally lost my temper with the chickens. I still feel bad. They were the only mob who didn't trample my crops. On this evening, I realised that there was yet another hill that was quite prominent and not yet covered in beetroot. I needed to change that. I had 3 full days left and the pressure was rising. This hill wasn't the largest, but there were sections of it that were quite steep, making it difficult to plant on. But I managed to completely cover the front of the hill in one day. By day 98, I had mostly covered everything in view of my house, so I decided to use my final 2 days in this world to try and join up some sections of my farm and make my beetroot spread further. It used a lot of seeds and lots of buckets of water, but I think it was worth it. The monsters really did try and stop my planting, including the Enderman, who made one last final appearance, jump scaring me. This was my last encounter with him, and not going to lie, I was kind of sad, but then I was quickly ambushed by zombies and a creeper, and the Enderman was forgotten. Day 99, my final day in this world. I had about 20 minutes to finish planting beetroot and then I'd be done. It felt slightly surreal. I had been planting and harvesting beetroot in this world every single day for over a month, spending hours and hours covering my world in this red plant that did literally nothing for my hunger bar. Yet Despite knowing the hours I put into not only filming but also editing it, I never asked myself the question of why. Why spend so long on this pointless endeavour? And the answer is because I actually enjoyed the process. It was satisfying and calming, despite quite a few stressful moments. Yes, at times it was a bit boring and tedious, but I really enjoyed seeing it all come together. The sun had set, and I was officially down to my last 10 minutes. As soon as the sun rose on day 100, the challenge would be over and I could stop planting beetroot. Those last 10 minutes went far too quickly. As I watched the sun rise and the moon fall behind the horizon, I felt content. I may not have planted as much beetroot as I thought I would have, but I planted a lot. And as I put away my final beetroot, I realised I had 5 double chests full of the crop and a world covered in it. It was really nice to look back and see how much my world changed. Not just the fact that I covered it in beetroot, but I also had to do a lot of landscaping to make it viable to plant on. Maybe if I'd utilised all of the nighttime instead of some, then I'd have made it further, but I'm not sure how much time in this world I'd have coped with. I had almost 14.5 hours of footage to rummage through. I don't think I would have managed with any more. Checking my statistics for one final time, I'd broken 207 stone hose, placed 1,289 water buckets, collected 18,402 beetroots, and planted 43,495 beetroot seeds. And finally, on day 100, I logged off.